Bore da, a chroeso I Abertawe. Welcome to Swansea and the Crown Estate's Bidders' Day for Offshore Wind Leasing Round 5. My name is Rebecca Williams and I'm Director for Wales at the Crown Estate. And I'm delighted that you've been able to join us here today. And it feels fitting for us to be in Swansea, a place defined and shaped by its relationship to industry, innovation and the sea, ahead of the launch of the next chapter of this story as we look forward to the competitive tender process for the Celtic Sea floating offshore wind round 5. I was brought up in Pembrokeshire and was home this weekend, driving past the industrial skyline that we are so familiar with and visiting Milford Haven and reflecting on the significant contribution made by these Westleigh communities to our energy security over many generations. I'm excited to think that what the future holds and what I will see when I make a similar journey home in years to come. Walking in here today, you cannot miss the copper tones of this building, referring to a time gone past when Swansea was known as Copperopolis, linking the South Wales economy with that of the South West. And as we look forward to this next chapter, we are reminded that the Celtic Sea has the opportunity once again to bring communities and economies of Wales, South West and the wider UK together for generations to come. Round 5 also represents an exciting new chapter in the global offshore wind story, and the impacts will be far-reaching, supporting the ambitions of the UK and Welsh governments in accelerating progress towards net zero and decarbonisation, while strengthening our energy security in a complex global environment. I hope you find today informative as you consider bidding in our upcoming competitive process. Moving on to the agenda, we have a full day ahead of us, and the agenda will appear on the screen behind me shortly. And we have a cast of experts from the Crown Estate who will share their knowledge, as well as representatives from the UK and the Welsh Government, the ESO and the UKIB with us today. This morning, we'll be focusing on how we go about managing the seabed and introducing the Round 5 opportunity. Later, we'll be looking at the leasing process in detail. And after lunch, we'll be focusing on some of the new processes we've introduced for Round 5 to support you and help de-risk the opportunities. We aim to close no later than 4 p.m. I know many of you will have digested the details set out in the information memorandum published in December, but we will be holding a couple of Q&A sessions over the course of the day, as I know you have things to ask. Just to reassure you, though, today is not the only opportunity to ask questions, and as we move through the tender process, the leasing team will be setting out the mechanism for seeking clarification in more detail, including the portal which will open alongside the publication of the PQQ. However, if you do wish to submit questions today, we're asking you to do this via Slido, and details will be available on the screen throughout the day, and there's no need to register. You can also scan the QR code when it appears on screen. Please also note the important points on screen, which will come on screen shortly, around competition law as we go throughout the day. Finally, from me this morning, some quick housekeeping and safety points. All of our sessions today will take place here in the main auditorium. Refreshments and lunch will be served on the lower ground concourse, and there are accessible toilets on each of the floors. There is some quiet space on level 2 should you need it, and you will notice a number of my colleagues with blue lanyards throughout the day. If you need any information or support, please do reach out. In case of an emergency, please follow the exit routes. If you might need assistance in the event of an emergency, please let us know beforehand and identify yourself to a member of the Crown Estate team. I've been informed that there are no fire drills scheduled for today, so in the event that you hear a fire alarm, please do treat it seriously and follow the directions available at the time. Please note that to ensure full transparency for any developer who is unable to attend in person today, we are filming this event in full. The recording will be made available on the Round 5 pages of the Crown Estate website in due course. So I'd like to take the opportunity to move on to the agenda, and I'd like to invite Gus Jasper, Managing Director of Marine at the Crown Estate, and the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford, and Minister for Climate Change, Julie James, to join me on the stage now. Before I invite Gus to the lectern, I want to take this opportunity to thank the ministers for their support today and for the months leading up to this, and also looking forward for the continued support of Welsh ministers and Welsh Government in this journey ahead of us. But I'd like to take this opportunity to offer a special thank to the First Minister for his support and leadership over the years. First Minister, you once described green energy transition as your legacy to Wales. I hope today, amongst us, we have the people that will take this forward. I wish you well in your next chapter and hope that includes some time at your allotment. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi a pob endydd. Yes.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and welcome again, everybody. It's great to have you here today, and I'm delighted of your interest in what we are talking through, but most importantly, what we are bringing to market and the opportunities this all presents. This is an exciting day. I reflected. I've been in this role just over 1 year as Managing Director of the Crown Estates Marine business. I know it's an exciting day because it's the first day I've seen my team in a tie, so something must be going well. But on a serious note, it's exciting for a number of reasons. It's exciting because, not just because of the incredible energy potential, green energy potential that we're bringing to market, 4.5 gigawatts, and a commitment also around space for a further 12 gigawatts. It's also important because of how we have designed this, and you'll hear more about the approach we've taken to evolve our approach to de-risk, to get these wind turbines to be some of the fastest deployments in UK history. It's also exciting because of the huge potential that this can bring for Wales, for South West England, and for the country as a whole. And it's also exciting because all of us in this room are working on the biggest challenge we face in our generation. How do we repower the nation? How do we move to green, renewable energy? And at the same time, how do we protect nature? How do we ensure that jobs, benefits, communities see all of that as a positive in the future? So this is an exciting moment. This is the launch of a key part of the future of the UK's energy system, as well as a key part of the future of Wales and South West England as well. Before we go forward today, just a little bit about the Crown Estate as well. The Crown Estate is a diverse company, a unique company. We are a company for the country. We have assets both on land and, of course, at sea. That includes property in London, across our regions, also a rural landowner, but crucially we manage the seabed across England, Wales and Northern Ireland and much of the coastline. We don't just manage it, we're driven by our purpose, but also by our constitution as a body that returns all of our profit to the nation to drive value for the nation. And by value, we do mean financial value. I'll come on to that a little bit. But crucially, we also mean environmental value, social value as well. How do we use what we do, the incredible assets that the nation has, to create a better future and better lasting prosperity for generations to come? You will see as we talk through this leasing round how we've taken that value and we made sure that that value is part of the requirements of this. So all of the elements are in there around the environmental value, around how we drive social value, and you'll hear more today about the innovations and the approaches around that, as well as how we ensure fair value for the nation. Before we go on, I want to thank all of you as well, because part of our evolution as the Crown Estate has also been to listen and to work with all of you, and we've evolved our approach on the feedback and the engagement that we've had. This started, for those of you who remember and followed this journey, as test and demonstration, moving into a 1 gigawatt proposal, and now we're talking about a 4.5 gigawatt proposition with a future of a further 12 gigawatts as well in the region. That's because we know the market demand is there, we know the energy demand is there, and the interest and the discussions we've had with you. As we've scaled up, we've also listened now about the feedback on timescales. We'll hear more later today, but I'm pleased to say that we've reviewed our timescale, and we're able to bring forward the bidding point. So when bidders know when the final bids are awarded, or when the final bids are concluded, will be now in March 2025, bringing that forward about 6 months to our original timescale. Again, you'll hear more of the details later. We've also heard about risk sharing, and you'll hear about the proposals we put in around risk sharing as well. You've also told us about systemic issues as well. So that's why, as part of this proposal, and you'll hear more about today, the Crown Estate has worked to spatially design this in the best possible way, working with partners crucial to all of that. How the Crown Estate also has invested upfront on surveys, environmental surveys, has put in place work to do the habitats regulation assessment upfront, and also to work with ESO on the grid design, taking those systemic issues, dealing with them head on, and making sure that we get the fastest deployment possible and lower the risks for you as developers. We've also taken on board your thoughts about innovation, so this will have the opportunity for hydrogen, for example, to be part of offtake. And also, just to address, we've listened about concerns about price, debates about whether there should be a cap on price or not. We're not doing a cap on price because what we know is that the market knows best. What we want is fair value for the nation and fair value for you as well. Simply put, I don't want you paying a penny more or a penny less than these propositions are worth. And that's why, as you'll hear later today, we've innovated about the end bidding design to make sure that fair value comes out in a transparent way as we do that. As the Crown Estate also, we are evolving going forward. You'll hear more today about our approach. Key to that in our marine business, which runs a whole host of both energy sectors, covering carbon capture, hydrogen, also interconnectors, other core proposals across the future of the seabed. One of the things we're doing is taking a step back to allow us to move forward faster. The pace of the energy transition we know is accelerating, but also the demands on our seabed are accelerating as well. So we're creating a whole of seabed plan. We're thinking about the future going forward. How do we make sure that we manage energy demands, but we also, crucially, manage and protect and increase nature at sea as well? We don't have an either-or between energy and nature. So we will talk more in time about a whole of seabed program, a route map for developing our seas and what that means also for onshore development, to be able to give not just a leasing round, but also to be able to give more certainty or more predictability to the market about what's coming when, where, and how it fits into the UK's energy system. Finally, just to talk about the UK market. So this isn't just an exciting opportunity because this is a chance to prove floating offshore wind at scale, what's going to be a crucial part of the global energy mix, but also because of the UK market itself. We know the UK market is a success. It is one of the world's leading offshore wind energy markets. That's through your success as well, as we've got to this point. It's also through our success. 25 years ago when we started the first turbines, we know we can create markets, we know we can develop them, we know we can do that in a way that keeps the UK in a world-leading position. The UK now has almost half as much operational wind deployed as the whole of Europe combined. And what we're doing today is that next chapter, taking us more into floating wind, keeping us at that leadership position. We in the Crown Estate are also investing our own capital to make sure that we can do that. We're investing over 50 million in our OEC program, our Evidence and Change program. We're also putting forward a supply chain accelerator as well, which we'll be talking more about in due course. And we're looking also, you may have seen in the autumn statement last November, about how we could, through legislative change, be able to unlock our capital to be able to de-risk and help to grow the market further. But also you'll hear today, and I'm delighted that the First Minister, Minister for Climate Change are here, about political support as well. The UK is a stable market, one with a clear success story, but also across the political divide, this matters. With clear targets, clear ambitions, a clear sense of purpose for where we're going, and you'll hear about that going forward, but also with a clear, stable regime in the CFD approach. So all the ingredients for success are here. The rest of it sits there with all of you, and I'm delighted in your interest today for taking forward on that journey. I hope you trust us. We know that we can develop markets. We know we can create the next future of offshore wind, taking us into deeper, windier waters as well with floating wind, and also at the same time drive environmental value, drive social value into communities as well. So I'm delighted that this is a day to start that. We'll have a chance throughout it to explore in more detail all of those aspects. But as we go through that, I also want to mark the excitement that is the start of Floating Wind Round, our round 5, and we'll be talking more about our next rounds and our future as we go forward. But thank you very much. With that, I'll hand to the First Minister as well. Thank you.
Wel, bore da, croeso mawr I chi gyd. Diolch am y cyfle I fod yma unwaith eto ar y clasur mor pwysig I ni yma yng Nghymru. It's a great pleasure to be back in Swansea and with you all. I'm here and the Minister for Climate Change are here because today is a very important day for the industry, for those new possibilities in floating offshore wind, but also for Wales and for our ambitions as a nation. As you've heard, there are huge business opportunities in what has already been announced through the Crown Estate, and as you've just heard from Gus, for what will come beyond what is already known and being planned for. Of course, we are here to talk about what the Welsh Government can do. Julie will say a bit more about those aspects that lie in our hands: consenting, public investment, infrastructure, skills, where we are already doing a huge amount to prepare for the needs of the industry of the future. I wanted, in my few minutes, though, just to say something more about the significance of the marine renewable sector and the floating offshore wind, particularly to Wales. Because for Wales, we are absolutely committed to two fundamental things which will sit behind the success of the businesses that will work in this field here in Wales. First of all, we are absolutely serious about the part that we can play in that great global challenge, which is climate change. As a government, we are simply not prepared to leave to future generations the mess that has been made of the planet on which they will live their lives. The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act compels us as a government to test every decision we make in the here and now against the impact it will have on those who follow us. And for all of those reasons, we have been absolutely serious about putting all our efforts behind those developments that will allow not just Wales but the world to be powered in future in ways that work with the natural environment that we have rather than its exploitation. And we're hugely fortunate in Wales because the richness of those natural resources is absolutely real for us. Here we are on the western edge of the United Kingdom, facing out to the Atlantic. It rains occasionally in Wales. Solar energy is definitely part of our mix. We're surrounded by the sea on three sides, and the wind blows in off the Atlantic to us. Here on the brink of the fourth industrial revolution, we are so well placed to be able to put those natural resources to work for the future of Wales. And as I say, because we will be, we hope, the pioneers, the global pioneers in floating offshore wind, and the work that we do and the developments that you will be hoping to be involved in will be there, not just for the United Kingdom, but for that global market that we will need to see in order to power the world in that way in future. The second reason why we are so committed to this agenda is because it is a relatively rare moment when the needs of nature and the needs of the economy come together in one beneficial combination. You've heard Gus talk earlier, and you will talk, I know, of value, of economic value, of social value. In the Welsh Government, we also talk the language of justice, of the future in Wales being one founded on social justice, environmental justice, and social justice as well. And for us, that means that the opportunities that there are with our natural resources must be put to work for the benefit of people who live in Wales today. The first industrial revolution began here in South Wales, but for too many and too often, the first industrial revolution was a process of extracting value from Wales, taking our natural resources and seeing the benefit of that not felt in Welsh communities but exported elsewhere. In the new industries, the floating offshore wind, the marine renewables, we need to capture that value and make sure that it is put to work for people who live here in Wales, who want to make their futures here in Wales. And that's why these are two agendas that come so powerfully together. So for us, today is a really important step on that journey, taking the things that have created huge excitement in Wales, the potential for floating offshore wind, and making that not just a dream in somebody's eye, but a reality, where people will see this industry happening in front of them, and in seeing it happen, will recognize it as an industry in which they have a direct and important stake in creating that future set of economic possibilities. You will all be part of that, and the Welsh Government will want to be a solid and reliable and committed partner alongside the Crown Estate with the UK Government, but with the industry as well, to make the very most of both the economic opportunities, but also those reputational opportunities that will come for companies who end up being part of this journey here in Wales. So thank you very much for all the interest you have shown, for being here today. We look forward to working with you all as the process unfolds and as we move in that practical way down that journey together to the future. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you all very much indeed.
Bore da pawb, croeso I Abertawe. It's very nice to be here on my home patch, looking at an audience of people that we've been working with, many of you for many years, on a shared agenda to bring, as the First Minister just said, social, economic and environmental prosperity and justice to Wales as part of the same piece of work. I'm just going to set out 5 ways in which the Welsh Government hopes to continue to strengthen that partnership with the offshore renewable sector in Wales. A bit of a canter through, I'm afraid, but most of you will be familiar with some of this at least. So the first set of things are our policies. They're central to our ambition for what we're doing. The reason there's a Minister for Climate Change in Wales is a complicated thing, as all these things are, but one of the main reasons is that the Youth Parliament of Wales asked for there to be such a minister. And they asked for there to be such a minister so that the Welsh Government could demonstrate that climate justice and the fight against climate change was central to the government here. And it's been a privilege and a pleasure to serve in Mark's government to make sure that that is mainstreamed into Welsh policies. And those policies have been hard fought for. So one of the first policies is that we will no longer extract fossil fuels from our environment. We're currently fighting at least 3 legal cases on whether or not we can sustain that policy. These are not easy changes to make, but we are determined to do it, to make that transition. But the transition has to be a just transition. The people working in those industries now have to find futures in the new industries. So the skills piece is very important, both for the upcoming generations and for the people working in industry who are not yet at the end of their career, who need to transition. And we'll be working very closely with yourselves and with our FE and university sectors, and indeed with our schools, to make sure that that skills pipeline is in place. But it's also very important for the transition. I'm going to mention the Tata Steel situation here. It's a disaster for these communities here. We've already seen some backlash against green policies on the sewer that is X. But, you know, these are heartfelt things that people will make quick to judge, knee-jerk reactions to something that seems to be standing in the way of their continued prosperity. Speaking to the unions only yesterday, though, at the Welsh Government, it's quite clear that the unions see the need to decarbonise steel, but they need to decarbonise steel in a way that enhances this industry, that makes sure that we can produce components or indeed whole turbines here in Wales. That's what we'd really like to see. What we'd really like to see is a supply chain using materials from Wales produced in an efficient and properly decarbonising steel industry. So I want to encourage you and the Crown Estate to be working with Tata Steel over the next year to make sure that that transition is not the abrupt transition that is devastating so many of our communities tonight. And that is central to our policy. The just transition is central to our policy. And that just transition has to come from yourselves. It has to come with you working with our supply chains, working with our local people, working with people who want to come and live and work in Wales and stay in Wales and bring their skills and their creative and cultural contributions to Wales for the future. So that's absolutely central to what we do. We're also setting in stone targets to generate renewable energy in Wales, which is equivalent to 100% of our energy consumption here in Wales by 2035. You're obviously a pivotal part of that, alongside a number of other sectors, but clearly a pivotal part of that. A pivotal part of the national mission that we have to make sure that we take our place on the global stage in doing this. And as the First Minister has just said to you, we retain that value here in Wales for the first time, actually, in an industrial revolution, and not just see it transported elsewhere. The second policy I want to talk to you about is grid. Many of you will have heard me bang on about the grid for years, long before I had this job. We have been talking about proactively looking at the grid for many, many years in Wales. We're the first government in the UK to undertake the comprehensive process of local, regional and national energy planning, which takes into account not only electricity but the gas grids as well, which allows us to put a holistic approach into promoting efficiency and innovation for the grid. That means we've been able to work with the grid to make sure that the newfound, hallelujah, proposals for planning the grid and making sure that it actually does what it's intended to do, but for both transmission and distribution is there. And I know the Crown Estate has been playing a big part in that as well. We've had a number of very productive meetings with the grid, so we do hope that those connection dates will start to get a lot more realistic and a lot closer than they have been hitherto. We want to make sure that those energy grids serve the people of Wales, though, as well. We have very large parts of Wales, excuse me, which just don't have any grid. We can't get electric vehicle charging points out into Wales. And I live here in Swansea, and my house browns out very frequently. So, you know, we have some real serious problems here. And making sure this energy supply goes properly into the grid and is properly distributed will be a big part of what we're doing. We also want to make sure that rather than turbines sitting idle, that they're used to produce green hydrogen, which we absolutely want to make sure that we have a good investment for here in South Wales. So it's a very whistle-top tour through that, but nice to see the changes already happening and really grateful to work with the Crown Estate to get those changes to happen. The third point I want to mention is just consenting. We've been working very closely with both industry and regulators to strike the right balance between protecting short and long-term interests of the people of Wales and giving certainty to developers and others who are keen to invest here in Wales. We've just done an end-to-end review of the marine consenting process, and I was very pleased to see the Erebus project go through that process. We've got an infrastructure bill I'm taking through the Senedd at the moment, which will streamline that process and make it very clear what is expected of applicants up front. and make sure that that process is as streamlined as we can make it. And we also work with the UK government to make sure that the seam, if you like, between the Welsh government and the UK government is as barrier-free as we can manage to make it. But it's got to be said that that's in the context of making sure that we are nature positive, that we are proactive in our defence of the environment. And I've been very glad to see the Crown Estate doing the upfront work on some of that and making sure that we have some of the data necessary to be able to understand and mitigate some of the issues and indeed actually enhance. There is a real opportunity here, it seems to me, to actually put enhancement into our environment out of these projects, not just do no harm, but actually proactively be nature positive. So we'll be very much pushing the opportunities for that kind of continuous improvement in the consenting process. We're also looking at a spatial planning arrangement for the marine environment in Wales. We're not producing a spatial planning quite the way that we have on land, but we are looking to work with you to develop spatial policies that make it both easier to consent projects, but also easier to protect environmental areas, particularly the marine protected zones. So there will be some announcements on that very shortly as well. The fourth issue is planning. I've met a number of you over a number of occasions about planning. We're absolutely focused on the full implementation of the Wales Marine Plan and the most recent 5-yearly review. We're really looking at that spatial perspective, but we're also working with our local authorities, and the local authorities are currently doing their regional planning policies to make sure that what we're proposing is fit for purpose and the local authorities and NRW and the other agencies can actually deliver in a timely fashion what they're asked to deliver. This is no mean feat. We have real problems retaining planning in the public sector. The Welsh Government is just as guilty as all of you of poaching 5-year qualified planners and then complaining that there's not enough resource in the local authorities. So I would ask you to work with us to make sure that we have a resilient planning system that works for everyone and make sure that we have enough qualified planners in the system at regional and at local level to be able to make this really happen. That's a matter I'd really like to engage with all of you much more frequently on. I know we've had a couple of conversations already. And of course, the last but not least at all is our work with the Crown Estate. We've really been seeing the Crown Estate as a crucial partner for Wales. We've had robust conversations with the Crown Estate about making sure that the Welsh Government's policy ambitions are front and centre of their planning, as well as the UK Government's propositions, that they comply with our environmental requirements and with our just transition requirements, and that they work with the supply chain. This has not been a difficult conversation to have with them. They've been very keen to be part of that conversation, and we really hope to take that forward together. So I just wanted to say overall that I hope that you can see that we have a commitment to this sector, that it's part of our national mission, that it's part of our future generations' work, and that it's part of our global fight against climate change and for nature. So I'm delighted to be here today. I hope that you can all invest the way that you want to in Wales, and that together we can make Wales a fairer, greener and more prosperous place. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Minister for Climate Change. First Minister, very much appreciate your time and commitment for being here today. And as the current panel leaves the stage, I'd like to invite someone who is very familiar to most people in the audience to take forward the next session. Tim, a name who we have all met over the last couple of years and has been behind much of the conversations with you and developing this process. So Tim, over to you for the next session.
Thanks, Rebecca. And just on a personal note, if I start with a personal reflection, I think if we can all sort of speak and think with the conviction and clarity that we heard from the First Minister and the Climate Change Minister there, the future will be okay. So thank you both to them for their remarks. Listen, a very warm welcome to you all to Leasing Round 5. A seabed offer exclusively for floating technologies in some of the best waters in the Celtic Sea. With the PDAs that we're going to describe to you today perhaps only 100 miles from this venue, and certainly closer to here than they are to London. It's an absolute pleasure to see you all here. There are a few more of you than I reckoned on when you all come together, and I think I'm going to end up with a crick in the neck by the end of the session, but it's a real delight to see you. This does mark a really important milestone on a long shared journey. And reflecting on that for a moment, I think back to December 2020, where we ran our first formal market engagement to gauge your interests in floating wind. And you expressed your clear preference for developing floating wind in this region. In your responses to us, you focused on the favourable resource, the favourable grid, and the promising but nascent conditions for ports and supply chain. Round 5 sets the stage for commercialisation of floating wind in the UK. There is no doubt that floating wind is an essential component of the UK's path to net zero. We need that spatial flexibility and the ability it affords to push into deeper waters to give us higher volumes of offshore wind on our seabed, whilst protecting the environment and keeping consenting risks for you within a manageable envelope. Our focus on commercialisation in this round is very clear, and it opens the path for us to be more technology agnostic in our leasing in the future. And Johnny Boston, my colleague, who many of you know well, will make some remarks about the future later on this afternoon. So today, it is about looking forward with optimism and with collective energy, but I think it is just worth taking a moment to reflect and remember that had we been meeting here just a few months ago, our view of the floating wind landscape could have been very different. Right through much of 2023, there was significant uncertainty about the future potential for wind in the Celtic Sea, given some of the spatial constraints that we shared with you at the time. We knew then, and we still know, that clarity on the future opportunity is key to your decision making and informs how you will address this opportunity and some of those challenges that the First Minister and that Julie James were talking to about creating social value. So it is enormously heartening that instead we find ourselves in a situation where the government has outlined its firm intention to push towards up to 12 further gigawatts of offshore floating wind in the Celtic Sea, and you will hear that message directly from the Secretary of State for Energy herself this afternoon in her message to you. Getting to this point has been the fruits of months of careful internal deliberations across Whitehall, fully supported by the Crown Estate team, and so we are thrilled that now we can put the case for the future of the Celtic Sea on much firmer foundations and provide that much longer time horizon to your thinking to support key investment decisions in the growing supply chain in this region. And we know as well that you will want to know always more. So when? How much? When? And again, Johnny will reflect on some of that this afternoon to lift the lid a little bit. You know better than we do, or as well as we do, that development is not a risk-free endeavour. And while there are still many careful balances to be struck in designing and delivering these first projects, we are convinced that these round 5 projects that we're laying out today here represent a compelling commercial investment proposition for you and your shareholders. We have 3 project development areas, each up to 1.5 gigawatts in capacity, which are the results of years of detailed evidence gathering, planning, and intensive engagement with relevant stakeholders, hundreds of them. The locations are very well advantaged from a development perspective. The PDAs are as close as you can get to the grid for floating wind in the Celtic Sea, as close as you can get to relevant ports, with reliable winds in a location that brings more geographic diversity to the energy system operator in the UK. As we mature and evolve our approach to seabed leasing to meet the dual challenges of net zero and protecting biodiversity, you will see our role and yours change, as Gus mentioned earlier on. Round 5 brings some of those things to life for the first time, so I just want to briefly outline the number of ways in which we've sought to de-risk this offer. We have pre-selected the project development areas. We've front-loaded the habitat regulations. We've been aligning our design with the grid. We've commissioned an extensive program of pre-consent surveys, and we're committed to sharing that data with successful bidders. All of those things we're doing ahead of the tender. Looking at the tender itself, we've embraced the concept of what some of you like to call, and I think we agree, stepping stone development. We recognize that it will take time for the supply chain to fully mature, and we recognize that 1.5 gigawatts of development is a big ask for the sector at this stage, even taking account of the very significant capability and experience that you bring. So we've given you the optionality to develop the project development areas in a way that suit your strategy and your risk appetite. If you wish, you can bring forward your project in phases, and we'll set out more detail on that later on today. Looking to other improvements, we've also chosen to go with an ascending clock auction to increase price transparency, allowing you to properly reflect the risks of developing a new technology in a new region in your bidding strategy. And you'll also see that we've introduced some consenting risk sharing into the option fee arrangements, all of which we hope will encourage you to bid with security and with confidence. Taken together, that puts us collectively in a strong position to deliver at scale, a scale that promises to be transformative from an economic point of view and from a point of view of delivering clean, renewable power and energy security for the UK. 4,000 permanent jobs is our most recent estimate of the economic opportunity that arises from this leasing round alone, with around £300 million a year in additional economic activity throughout the construction period of these projects. This is a significant undertaking, and there are real challenges, and we will need to work together to overcome those. Right now, we don't have the ports that are required to support round 5. The supply chain is in its infancy, and the skills pace will take time to develop. We've been working with you, with the Welsh Government, with the UK Government, and with business groups and many other stakeholders to plot a route that will allow us to plug those gaps and to grow the necessary capabilities. And through this leasing round, that process will gain more momentum. So that's why we've introduced new features of our tender, and why, in particular, we've insisted that bidders nominate their preferred ports for integration, and that they make early commitments to those ports, supporting the investment case and the early development of that infrastructure, because we believe that that investment in ports is critical in unlocking the wider and later and larger supply chain opportunity that we want to land. Alongside supply chain requirements, you will see that we expect you to come forward with plans that show your ability to drive positive social and environmental outcomes through round 5. I know that this agenda is as important to you as it is to us. And I know that in your businesses, you already have the appetite and capabilities to deliver these outcomes for society. So hopefully, you'll find that the requirements of our tender are a match for your appetite and a match for your intentions, and will have a degree of familiarity about them. So we will be looking to you to explain your plans to support apprenticeships, to support volunteering, to support community engagement, to secure positive environmental outcomes. And these are requirements of the tender that my colleagues will speak to in more detail shortly to ensure that you have a robust and secure understanding of what it is we're looking for from you. Taken together, your commitments will undoubtedly contribute to our collective success. A success that means Round 5 binds together communities and enhances the life opportunities of those who live on this region. So let me change gear a little bit. It was my job to frame the offer for you and to signpost what's to come in terms of detail today. I hope I've done that well. And I'm going to hand you into the care of Joe, who I think you also know well. Joe will introduce to you the project development areas, which, if you like, the product in the shop window. What are you here for? You're going to bid on some project development areas to build 1.5 gigawatts of floating wind. So Joe, please set out the offer on the project development areas for us. Thanks, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Joe Smitherman, and I've led on the spatial design for Round 5, and you may have heard me speak to you at previous webinars held throughout the process. We'll be taking a break shortly, after which my colleagues will take you through our tender process step by step. Before that happens, I want to set out how we've arrived at our spatial design put forward in the information memorandum. Throughout Round 5, we've taken a number of steps to de-risk the process for developers as far as possible. This includes our detailed spatial design, as well as our upfront HRA, work with National Grid ESO, and our pre-consent survey program. Today, I will cover some key principles and objectives, the site selection process, and a bit of a deep dive into the project development areas themselves. Thinking about key principles and objectives. The first for us is de-risking. This is a key part of the Crown Estate approach to Round 5. We know that developers rely on us to identify risks and seek to manage them as best we can. On spatial, we've undertaken a rigorous exercise examining the Celtic Sea to ensure decisions are informed by a full range of data and evidence. We've been guided by stakeholder engagement, both with the market and across a variety of stakeholder groups, including navigation, fishing, and environmental stakeholders, to name a few. And finally, technical decisions underpinned by sound analysis. We've worked with engineering experts at Arup, Fraser-Nash, ORE Catapult, the Carbon Trust, and DNV to develop our understanding of the costs and risks to floating wind development in the Celtic Sea. And my colleague Mike Blair will be joining us on a panel later today in which you can ask more questions about that. So, moving on to a recap of the site selection process. Those of you who have joined us on the spatial design journey to date will have seen this slide before in one guise or another. It outlines the high-level steps we have taken to identify project development areas, starting at the beginning with the Celtic Sea as a whole and drawing it down to 3 sites with a series of engagement touch points throughout. Starting out, this is our area of interest, the Celtic Sea, 75,000 square kilometres in size. We then used 3 separate models and combined them to produce a spatial output that identifies constraint that can be engaged upon with stakeholders. This is our technical model. Developed in collaboration with our partners Everose in 2020, the model is a key resource area for floating wind. Essentially, where could the technology be deployed? The output is driven by water depth, metocean conditions, and geology. The second model outlines hard constraints that sit within the Celtic Sea. You should be able to make out behind me some of the traffic separation schemes around the Isles of Scilly, as well as the number of subsea telecoms that crisscross the region. The third and final model is called a restrictions model. It pulls together weighted soft constraints such as navigational density, fishing intensity, and in combination with the previous two models, it produces an output shown in the map behind me. You'll hopefully be able to make out some of the navigational channels of constraints, environmental designations, and some fishing activity if you know the region well enough. After taking the least constrained areas, we engaged with stakeholders in targeted bilateral engagement and identified 5 broad areas of search, totaling just over 12,000 kilometres squared in size. Following another series of targeted bilateral engagement with stakeholder groups, including defence, subsea telecoms, navigation and fishing, we refined the areas down to 5 refined areas of search, totaling approximately 4,500 square kilometres. Through the spatial design process, one significant shift in our focus occurred in July 23, when we narrowed in on refined areas of search A and B, the two located closest to inshore. As detailed at the time, this was because of multiple demands on the seabed that imposed constraints on areas we were able to consider for development. Tim has alluded to the fact those constraints have been the subject of intensive discussions, with government aiming to resolve those considerations. The fact that the UK government is officially anticipating a further 12 gigawatts beyond round 5 reflects the positive direction of travel. Also in July 23, we shared with you a minded to position of 4 project development areas. Based on the feedback received, we moved to a free PDA design, allowing each PDA an up to capacity of 1.5 gigawatts, which we determine will allow greater flexibility for developers to adapt their designs within a PDA as they progress, maximising capacity and reducing risk. Moving on to the PDAs themselves, we have produced individual summary characterisation reports which set out the differences between the PDAs, which are actually relatively small. The reports include thematic topics depending on interactions they face, including fishing, environmental, navigation, subsea telecoms, civil aviation, and defence. As outlined, we've sought to de-risk the areas as far as possible, and the reports highlight the minimal interactions there are. However, some points are worth drawing out. Capacities of up to 1.5 gigawatts for each PDA have been derived by carefully researching factors affecting turbine layout design, including wake effects, mechanical fatigue loading, and mooring system configuration. Our PDAs have a power density value in the range of 4.2 to 4.5 megawatts per square kilometre, which we believe strikes a good balance between technical risk and efficient use of the seabed, affording some redundancy in the event that some portion of the PDA turns out to be undevelopable. We also decided on 1 kilometre buffers external between PDAs 1 and 2 in order to create maximum flexibility within the space available. This decision again drew on independently reviewed technical modelling and learning from other markets, as well as an assessment of any risks this might create during construction and operation. We've also introduced turbine exclusion zones on abutting perimeters in order to ensure a safe 2 kilometre minimum separation between turbines in any 2 neighbouring projects. I should note with regard to navigation that extensive engagement with navigation stakeholders has allowed us to consider navigational safety when identifying PDAs, and as a result has minimised risks. However, as is normally the case, there would still be a need for developers to undertake their own navigational safety assessment when it comes to PDA design. Another point to note is the potential need for Ministry of Defence and civil radar mitigation measures for offshore wind development in this area. Our engagement throughout spatial design has revealed that suitable mitigation is likely to be available. Specific details would need to be assessed at a project level. Just to reiterate, these 3D PDAs are locked in, agreed through discussions with government that were supported at every stage by the Crown Estate, and for bidders' purposes strike a balance between the economic potential for developers and minimising potential impact to the environment and other users of the sea. Closing out on technical parameters, we've looked into the key factors influencing economic and technical viability, so we wanted to just outline these. Long-term mean wind speeds across the PDAs are expected to exceed 10 metres per second. Water depth ranges between 68 metres and 88 metres, which we've considered as likely to be suitable for multiple floating concepts, including semi-submersibles, barges, and potentially tension-leg platforms, although we don't anticipate spar buoys will be utilised due to the relatively shallow depth. Grid feasibility was assessed with both HVAC and HVDC concepts under consideration. The PDAs, as Tim's spoken to, are relatively close to shore, between 40 and 60 kilometres, and are at a scale that may be served readily by available grid technology. There are a few key design considerations to highlight. BGS data shows that the seabed geology is diverse, with significant areas of low-depth sediment to bedrock, so we anticipate the need for a range of different anchoring technologies. As we'll hear from Graham later on, we're undertaking geophysical surveys, and as a result, a more refined geology model will be available in due course. It's worth noting now that early findings of those geophysical surveys have indicated a difference in the bedrock in some locations comparative to the BGS data. These initial results are still being quality assured, and we will seek to make them available ahead of the auction process. And finally, on technical, extreme wave heights of up to 14 metres will also be present, which is an important input for substructure designers. I know that you've all had weeks to look through the characterisation reports, and what we're hearing in terms of feedback echoes our own thoughts that by going through this very rigorous, robust process, we've been able to deliver PDAs that bidders can approach with confidence. The characterisation reports are supported by our summary stakeholder feedback report, which provides an overview of the feedback we have received from stakeholders over the past 3 years and subsequent actions taken as a result. Lastly, additional detailed information will be published for bidders when the appropriate assessment is complete, and my colleague Sean Roberts will cover this in more detail when he talks you through the HRA process this afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Good stuff, thank you, Joe. And in case you missed the subtle message there, I think what Joe is trying to say is these are absolutely cracking sites. Okay. So, listen, we're running a little ahead of time, which is always good, and we're due to move to a break now. So I'd invite you to join us for coffee, tea, whatever is your preference. And we would like to see you back here at 10:50 sharp to start again sharp, and colleagues will begin to unfold for you the detail of the tender and the leasing process. So thank you for your attention so far this morning. Please do take a break. See you back here at 10:50. Thank you.